Paul.
Hey,
Hey, have you seen this video that's floating around? You know the one I'm talking about.
I do, Mr. Tim Gurner.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that.
Okay, so we've got the
Okay. Yeah.
classic, nobody wants to work anymore.
This guy is a multimillionaire, a real estate developer in Australia. And back in 2017, he basically told millennials, stop buying avocado toast and you could buy a house. So
You've heard all the jokes. You've heard all the jokes over all the years, and it's very important that you understand this is the man who first said millennials were buying too much avocado toast, and if they stopped, they would be able to buy houses. This is the guy.
This is him.
Patient zero. Yeah.
If you were wondering who the fool was who scolded you about eating avocado toast, and you should then save up your avocado toast money to buy your multi-million-dollar first home, this is the dude.
Has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40-50% in my view. We need to see.
Wait a minute. Okay. Wait. Okay. So first of all, he says productivity has declined, which, by the way, he doesn't cite any statistics for this, and I don't know exactly what's going on in Australia. But for the most part, maybe productivity flattened a little bit, but it's not like we haven't been very productive. We're still producing a lot in this moment. And in fact, COVID was kind of crazy. It kind of collapsed the economy. You may remember that we turned the whole thing off and then we had to turn it back on. So it was definitely disrupted. But this idea that we're paying people too much money to not do enough, that's kind of strange. But then the second thing he said, did he just say that we need unemployment to go up 50%?
40 to 50% is what he said, which now I haven't got a fancy economics degree, but I'm pretty sure that would sink the world economy if we hit 50% unemployment at any one time. If fully half the population, that's never happened before. Fully half the population
this guy.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear. Okay. So gotta increase employment and
Pain the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there is a.
Okay, we need massive unemployment, and I believe he said we need pain in the economy to remind people that they work for their employer, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
pain in the economy. Okay, all right.
Okay, all right. Here we go.
There's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So,
okay. Well,
now, it's just staggering, right? This is mustache curling cartoon villain stuff here, saying that employees should be grateful for the mere fact of their employment. I'm all for, I've had good bosses, I've had bad bosses. I've had situations where I was grateful to be employed, but the thinking that it's a one-way street and that every worker in the world should be grateful for the mere fact that they're employed to spend 40 hours a week, if they're lucky, doing their work is some real entitlement. Some tremendous entitlement. Yeah.
And the worst part about it is the way that he phrases that. He says that employees should be grateful for their job. In other words, their employees should be grateful for the employer, but not the other way around, he says. Well, wait a minute. At minimum, shouldn't it be that we're all grateful for each other? Because in any enterprise, whether you're at a nonprofit or whether you're at a commercial endeavor or you're some firm or you work for the government, everybody's in it together. Each of you has a job and a role to play. And this guy's saying that you should be grateful, not the other way around. I should not be grateful for you, which is just an absolute encapsulation of this very toxic thinking that has really invaded. It used to be that you couldn't say this kind of thing out loud, but boy, they are really emboldened in this moment. And it's an incredible reaction to worker power that's happening all over, where workers are finally demanding a fair share of the things they do. They are the producers. They make productivity go. They produce. There's obviously a management system that sets that up, but then they're asking for a fair share. And this guy's saying, you should just be grateful you got a job. And more importantly, I wish there was more unemployment and more pain in the economy, because what he's not saying here, I want to have more power over you, that we need to have capitalists and the management class to have more power over labor. All right, let's see where he goes from here, Paul.
All right. I bet you it's nowhere good.
It's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off for people.
Well, wait a minute. Whoa. Two things here. He says the most honest thing in this whole thing. You get all of these economists, all these folks who work at the Federal Reserve or central banks all over the world. They use all this kind of fancy language about how they want a soft landing and they need to soften the labor market and they need to see less demand. But what they are absolutely saying is what this guy is, what they're using fancy language to cover that what they want is really high unemployment to rebalance the economy. But in rebalance, what they mean is to take it back to the way it was, where workers were exploited. They want an economy where there's more fragility for workers, so there can be more exploitation. So this guy wins and everybody else loses. So that's number one. Number two, he talks about there's massive layoffs. I don't think, I could be wrong, there's definitely not massive layoffs in the United States. In fact, we're at the highest rate of employment in modern history in the United States. And I believe that carries itself over to Australia, who also has one of the tightest labor markets there are. So this notion, he's setting up this threat. This is the thing that everybody always does when you're a trickle downer. You threaten workers. You tell them, if you don't buckle, if you don't give up some of your power, I'm going to fire you. So he wants to raise this specter of, you're going to get fired if you ask for more. And that is genuinely that's an intentional thing. The difference between him and the central bank is he just saying it bluntly with his slick back hair and his crazy black suit. Everybody else tries to gauge, oh, well, we need a soft landing, and that means we need to soften, we're looking for a soft labor market. Occasionally, Larry Summers will throw out a little word or two about, well, maybe if we have, a couple percentage more unemployment. What they're not telling you is they're talking about laying off. They want layoffs measured in the millions and millions in the United States. They want high percentages of unemployment. They want to double unemployment. This guy might want, who knows, this guy might want to quadruple unemployment in order to workers as weak as possible.
Yeah. He's really saying the quiet part loud. I don't know if that makes him more or less of a villain, honestly. But anyway, let's see how he lands this plane.
Might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
Wow.
So it has to, okay. So we're seeing that arrogance recede, he says, which, based on the way that Gurner judges worker arrogance, I'm not sure that we are seeing that, right? We're seeing workers striking for higher wages. We're seeing low-wage workers are still, demanding higher wages, and they're still switching jobs for better employment and things like that. So what he would call arrogance, I simply call, being a smart worker in the 21st century. But most of what he's saying is a complete either misreading, misrepresentation, or outright lie about the current state of the global economy in Australia and in America.
Yeah, and as you're saying, Paul, he is finally saying the quiet part out loud. There is no doubt that these are quiet conversations. Most employers, most CEOs, most executives, most fancy economists, they use other language. They talk about rebalancing the labor market. They talk about balancing supply and demand. They talk about a softened labor market will be good for the economy. They talk about all this stuff. Really, what they're trying to say is what this guy is saying very bluntly. You workers are too arrogant. The power balance is too shifted in your favor. You need to be punished and scared, and we need to make sure that you don't feel your own power in this circumstance. And more importantly, you should be grateful to us, not the other way around. I mean, listen, this is basically what Larry Summers is saying when he's talking about increasing unemployment. This is mostly what you hear even out of the Fed. Although, to be fair to the Fed, they have been hunting this soft landing, and what they mean by a soft landing is not dramatically increasing unemployment. But as Gurner points out, most of the real world impact of increasing these rates so dramatically is intended to take away worker power in order to soften the economy. And weirdly, and this is how twisted the logic of this trickle-down notions are, that a soft economy where workers suffer is a good economy. That is what he just said. And that's basically what most of these people say, right? They are trying to tell you that when workers suffer, when there's more unemployment, that is good for the economy. And that is just backwards, Paul. We know that more people working, more people producing, more people participating, that's what drives a thriving economy. That's what drives it. Workers drive it, not this clown.
Yeah, no, I can't assess exactly what's wrong with Avocado Timmy, but I know that his economic understanding of the economy comes from listening for his entire life to trickle downers like Larry Summers, right, who have convinced him that wealthy people are the job creators, not ordinary people. So he's maybe a little too drunk on the Kool-Aid, and that's why he's admitting why things are. Admitting what everybody else is whispering, but he's basically just a trickle down creation of mainstream economics for the last 40 years.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in this era of high inflation, Paul, we also see this other thing. He doesn't mention it here, but I believe Avocado Timmy would probably say this if we let him go a little longer, which is, whoa, wait a minute, can't increase wages because that'll impact inflation. Let's be clear. There is no evidence that in this moment of inflation, which is basically higher costs that are almost totally associated with everything that is not wages. Let's be really, really clear. It is not a wage price spiral. Now, what they're preying on when they say that is what happened in the 70s. Now, the 70s were a really complicated time. The economy was fundamentally different, and we had this crazy oil crisis. This was back in a time when the whole world was highly dependent on the Middle East for oil. That has fundamentally changed. In fact, the United States of America is one of the highest producers of oil now in the whole world. There's lots of oil that's found all across the world. There's a different dynamic when it comes to energy. And of course, we've made dramatic gains with renewable energy. So it's a much more stable energy economy, much more diverse, much more interesting. And the second thing was, back then, it was largely manufacturing economies, both in the US and in Western Europe. And that made for a lot of it was a different type of economy. It was an economy that could be very much disrupted by wage price spirals. And it kind of was. There was the combination of an oil crisis and a bit of a wage price spiral, where the more that wages went up, the more the prices went up, the more prices went up, the more wages went up. But that's not the world we live in today. It's fundamentally different. What we have here is a reaction to basically a once in 100-year crisis where we had a pandemic that required us to shut the economy off. And when we did that, we disrupted our supply chains. And equally, we had a moment where we had workers claim more power, but that had nothing to do with coming back into the economy and raising prices. This is clear. Almost every economist agrees with this. I'll tell you who doesn't agree with it. Trickle downers like Timmy here And you'll even hear it from elements of kind of a mainstream neoliberal left of center. They are really worried about this. Larry Summers is worried about this and others. But now we have had inflation declining dramatically as wages are rising. We have inflation falling now for almost a full year, and wages are rising. That if we were in a wage price spiral, you can't have wages rising and inflation falling.
Right.
So it's very clear. And I just want to be very clear. If you hear that, if you hear somebody tell you, well, I'd raise your wages, but it's going to increase inflation, that is BS. That's another way for them to intimidate you. The way we're going to get inflation under control is to make good investments in infrastructure, to fix our supply chain problems, and to get corporate greed under control. Because what's ended up happening is corporations see this inflationary moment, they're taking maximum advantage of it, and they're raising their prices. They know that the consumer is ready to pay more for a bunch of reasons, has nothing to do with wages, and they're coming in and saying, well, great, if you're willing to pay more, I'm going to take more profits. So to be clear, corporations right now, record profits all over the world. They are reaping record profits in a moment of record inflation. So this is not about wages. This is about profits, supply chains, and a really, really disruptive moment. Don't let them tell you otherwise.